All right, and we are live. Welcome to episode 35 of Catch and Counter. You can always catch us here on YouTube at 3 p.m. EST, or you can catch us on Big Mouth Radio every Wednesday at noon. If you catch us on the recap over there, we appreciate you tuning in with us. Nibs, kind of the big headline for the week, right? It's being reported by multiple outlets that Lamont Roach is going to move up one more weight class to take on Cruz December 6th. Obviously not an equal reward, right, to losing out on a rematch with Tank Davis, which he so clearly deserved. Tank obviously now doing whatever he's doing with Jake Paul over there. But I really like this fight. I still, again, it's not as big as a Tank fight. Nothing really is, but it seems like at least a decent replacement, but a different set of challenges. Moving up another weight class, right? He's only had one fight at lightweight, had great success there. But what are your first impressions of this matchup?
First off, thank you everybody for kicking it with us. You know what I'm saying? The ITR boys, Big Mouth Radio. Y'all know what it is. Look, man, I think obviously this is a consolation prize because the big money is Tank. If you're in Lamont Roach's camp, you obviously feel like you did enough to not only stick with him but win. A lot of people had him winning that last fight. So, but Tank is doing, like you said, what Tank does. He's chasing the bag. I can't really be mad at it. Once I'm looking at the numbers, I get it. But for
you can still Roach, be mad at it if you want, though.
Yeah. I mean, from the boxing side of things, I think it's absolutely fucking ridiculous. We'll touch on that another day. But from a financial standpoint, look, it'd be hard to turn down that kind of money, bro. Like, you know what I mean? To be honest with you, that no matter who you are, even at Tank and where he is financially, that kind of money is like, all right, I'll take it. But, for Lamont, sticking with him, I think he's earned the right to, be able to make his moves, bro. At 140, though, that's a whole different kind of beast, man. And Cruz is not to be taken lightly. I think a lot of people pick him as an opponent because for some reason they feel he can be an easier, introduction into the 140 weight class, and they're sadly mistaken, bro. So you have to understand who you're getting. Win, lose, or draw, Cruz is going to make you work during that fight. So I hope Lamont Roach is ready to go to work.
It really, and what the fight ultimately comes down to, right? Because we saw against Rayo, like Cruz can be outboxed. That's a possibility, and there's going to be a certain level of a boxer. Like I just don't see him being able to have success with somebody like a Richardson Hitchens or a Shakur. You know what I mean? I just don't think he doesn't have the same type of boxing skill that like a Williams Zepeda had to be able to close the distance on Shakur and engage. I just don't think he's at quite that level. But there's weight classes for a reason, and as great of a boxer as Lamont is, I just feel like that at some point has the potential to be a factor. Again, cut to a month and a half ago, I was saying that about Canelo Alvarez and Terrence Crawford. So this is also, in a way, it's not the same thing, but it is Lamont daring to be great and stepping up yet another weight class for a legitimate challenge. But I do wonder, like, why not stay at lightweight when there's so many? There is the fight with Shakur. There is a fight with Murataya. There is a fight with Andy Cruz. There's all of these, what I would say are interesting, compelling fights, but fights that are obviously not gonna cut the check that a Tank Davis fight would, and maybe not the same as what an Cruz fight would. It just seems like the lightweight division would be a great fit for him. I can't hate on him wanting to take on the challenge and take the risk, which I guess is part of what makes it such a great fight.
And who's to say he didn't try to get those fights made, right? Because look, I mean, if he was willing to come up and fight Tank, you know what I mean? If he's willing to go up to 140 and fight Cruz, who's to say he didn't seek out those other guys at 135? So, especially coming off of the Tank fight, I definitely, like you said, I would have been tooting my horn left and right. Like, hey, look, any and all comers, come on. Anybody with a belt, come on, let's run it.
Right.
Y'all y'all saw what happened to Tank come get this fade.
Right. And if he can't get Shakur, he's not going to get Keyshawn Davis, right? Because he's taking a time off or whatever he's doing. The other biggest names at lightweight aren't really available. And then it's like, does he want to take the Schofield fight? Well, Schofield's got to fight. Does he want to take on, any of the other fights at lightweight that might make sense? They don't make sense right now. And so I get the move, the wanting to stay active, and the wanting to find a fight that's going to be as close to the economic value to a Tank fight as possible because of how much, he's going to lose out on from that fight not happening.
And then you look at it like this, bro. A win against Isaac Cruz is a big feather in the cap, especially at 140 pounds. Maybe at 135, this wouldn't be as big a fight. But let's face it, Isaac Cruz at 140 is a player. You know what I mean? And he's a legitimate player. It's not like, oh, well, that's just the small guy from 135. He puts fear in the hearts of everybody at 140 pounds, bro. Because if you're a guy who likes to bang it out, if you're a guy who's not, doing the boxing and ring around the rosy shit, guess what? Isaac Cruz is a problem. You know what I mean? And even if you are a slick boxer, he's going to be in your face the entire fight. Even if he's losing 11 and a half rounds, he only needs one punch. You know what I'm saying? He's got legitimate enough power to make you look silly. And then the next thing you know, you just boxed yourself for 11 and a half rounds into a knockout. So, it's a dangerous fight all the way around.
I'm even more confident in Lamont's ability to do it, though, now having seen him go on 12 rounds with Tank, exchange with Tank, and never really even get rocked in that fight. I feel like Lamont's chin is as reliable and sturdy as they come right now. But the weight is just inevitably the question. He's always been a big 130-pounder. He looked good as a lightweight. He looked like a legitimate lightweight. Now, does that chin, does that power, and does that ability to do it for 12 rounds come up to 140 pounds with him?
I think the version he got to Tank is different, though. And so what I'll say to this is I don't think Tank was taking Lamont Roach very seriously. And I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, that, I'm using that as a cop-out for Tank. No, I think it's an indictment on Tank and where his mindset is.
I wonder if Tank was taking himself seriously.
Exactly. I think it's an indictment on where Tank is in the sport right now. I think he's not taking the sport seriously because he's got one foot out the door. You know what I mean? And he said as much himself, he's ready to retire. And I think that so – when you say, yeah, he went rounds with Tank, did he get the best version of Tank? Did he get a Tank that was really serious about what he was doing? You know what I'm saying? Or did he get a guy who was just coming in here to get what he thought was going to be an easy payday?
But he did get a guy who caught him right on. He did get a guy that caught him right on the chin though, and he never wobbled or faltered.
True enough. All I'm saying is we know for sure you're not going to get that from Isaac Cruz, right? Isaac Cruz is all business.
He's going to be ready.
Right. He's going to be all business. So we'll see the difference in the temperaments of the guys that he's fighting. I still, favor him. I wouldn't say super heavily, but you can never count out an Isaac Cruz because
you favor Roach, you're saying.
Correct. Yeah.
I think I do too, man. I just think he can do too many things. I feel like the Ryo fight, it's not that Cruz was exposed, but it just felt like, okay, that's a style that he's just not going to be able to deal with. And I think that Lamont, while he's not a massive puncher, he's got the get respect power. He's got enough, he was able to get Tank's respect. And I think that he'll be able to get Cruz's respect too, while, because the whole thing with Cruz, right, is if you let him set his feet and just kind of fire at you, you're fucked, right? That's why Rolly got steamrolled, because he was right there for it. And I don't think Lamont's going to be right there for it in the same way that some of Cruz's past wins have been.
Yeah, I mean, look, Rolly, God bless him, he's an entertaining fighter. But when all you have is power, that's not going to work against a guy like Isaac Cruz, right? He's been there, done that. You have to have multiple tools in your bag to beat a guy like Isaac Cruz. And that's what Lamont Roach has. He's got multiple tools in his bag. Now, the what we're going to find out is at 140, does he have enough get the fuck off me power to keep Isaac Cruz off his ass? Because you're going to need that for 12 full rounds against the Pitbull.
Nibs, I want to build on something that you said. It's a little bit of a segue from our pre-show meeting, but you said something really interesting. It's like when you saw the money, I can't be mad at it. And there's a part of that that I understand and agree with. But then this is where I start to that falls apart for me personally. Is you also were talking about how Tank's been pretty open about a lack of personal investment in the sport and in his commitment to the sport. And in that Mayweather, post-Mayweather era where it was like, we're the money guys, right? Like we're about getting that bag. We're about getting that money. But then you're not selling it. You're telling me you don't really care. You're telling me you're kind of mailing it in. And you're kind of like a shit salesman in terms of me, engaging with you as an athletic product, or as a serious athlete. Like, isn't it, if you're going to take those kinds of opportunities, isn't it kind of on you to be a better salesman than just like, yeah, I'm going to wrap this up in about 8 weeks. I'm looking forward to it. Like, don't you owe the sport at least that to try to sell them, the shit that you're feeding them?
Look, and I say this with all due respect. A lot of these guys who are riding the coattails of the Mayweather era, and they're trying to fit into that mold, right? Have to understand all the work that goes into that. This wasn't some shit that was done overnight. This isn't some shit that you can do just because you're good. Let's not forget, Floyd didn't become Money Mayweather until after he beat Oscar De La Hoya, right? Let's be clear. He was Pretty Boy Floyd pretty much up until then, right? So he wasn't making the kind of money that these guys are out here trying to make. He wasn't out here, being the villain or doing all that prior to probably the most pivotal fight in his career, which came, almost 30 fights in, right? So when you look at that, and then you also then have to understand after that, there's a lot of work that goes into that show. These guys aren't willing to do that shit though, or they don't know how, right? You saw the difference.
Or they don't think they should have to, Nibs. I think that's really the one that's, frustrating. Because the money came earlier for them. It came in advance of the tough fights, as opposed to Floyd, the money came at the tough fights. So, or I should say, the money came after the tough fights. He had to go through Chico Corrales and Jose Luis Castillo and all these other killers of his time to get to the Oscar De La Hoya fight, which was a massive earner at the time. I'm just kind of making the point of like, at the presser, it was one thing, right? But if Floyd got interviewed about an opponent that he was going to take, what did he always say, Nibs? He's a hell of a fighter. That's always what Floyd, listen, he's a hell of a fighter. And he was saying that because he was trying to sell you what he was pitching. Even if you knew it wasn't the best fight, he was going to tell you, listen, he's a hell of a fighter. So that you knew, I'm not taking bullshit fights. Because it was rarely bullshit fights. It was just, sometimes maybe it was past the guy's prime, or it was the third best option, or whatever it was, but he was trying to sell it to you. And I feel like Tank, he won't even sell it to you anymore. That's the thing that kills me about it. It's not that he's going to take the shit fight. He's not even selling it to you, bro.
Look, man, Michael Jordan says something when asked by Oprah Winfrey, what did he thought of, the new guys making all this money, right? And I'll keep it simple. He said the new guys getting these big paychecks kills hard work and ethic, right? Because the guys of his era, the Magic Johnsons, the Birds, the Charles Barkleys, they didn't get paid till they earned it. Michael Jordan, I didn't get paid till I earned it, right? Floyd Mayweather didn't get paid till he earned it. Manny Pacquiao didn't get paid till he earned it. That's another guy. Manny Pacquiao still trying to out here chasing belts. He didn't get his biggest payday, again. So you look, bro, and then I want to say you look at the difference, and again, I'm not on here to be the biggest Mayweather fan ever, but you look at when Tank was with Floyd, they were selling the show. To your point, right? They were selling the show. No matter who Tank was fighting, you were excited about it, right? For all his flaws people think he might have, Floyd knows how to sell the show. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
These guys don't, and guys need to go to that school if they want to get these big paychecks. And
it's like, if you don't give a shit, why do I give a shit? Right? Like, if you as a fighter don't give a shit, why am I as a fan, a working class fan, gonna put money into what you're doing? I see Jake trying to sell it, and I just see a general, and there was a general disinterest from Tank during the Roach fight. But again, we've talked about this before. If he was really just about like getting money in boxing, he'd already have had 3 fights with Ryan Garcia, right? So there was a way for him to make the big money, to avoid maybe taking the absolute hardest fight in the moment, the same way that Floyd did, and created something, I think, a legacy that held a little bit more substance in the grand scheme of boxing. And he turned that up and said, yeah, I don't really care. And I don't really care about this other bullshit fight I'm doing either.
That's one thing that, it's a big knock on Tank right now is people are saying, yeah, he's had big money fights, but he's beaten a lot of okay guys, right? Like,
he's beaten some great fighters. He beat Leo Santa Cruz, but Leo was coming up. There's a caveat on almost every single one of even his best wins. And there was never a point where he took the best guy of the moment. And I think that, even with him being young, he's still 29, 30 years old. There's always been this thinking like, okay, he's going to take the big one that's going to be the Shakur fight. It's going to be the Haney fight. It's going to be the Teo fight. It's going to be, and it just never happened.
And I can't say that I blame him for all of that. I do think that there were negotiations for those fights. I think, to be honest with you, I think it was a money thing with, him and Shakur, him and Devin. That's why Devin never took that fight. They actually put out the contract that Tank's people put the contract out there that they sent them, and never got a response. So I can't say that you can blame Tank 100% for that. I think a lot of people didn't want to smoke with him, especially, when he was at his hottest. You know what I'm saying? Right now, he's kind of cooled off, and now he's just doing the, let me get this bag kind of shit.
But you remember, like 8 years ago, the fight that would have been popping at the moment was him and Tevin Farmer, right? Like, Tevin was on that great win streak. They were kind of at each other's post fights, and then that fight just doesn't happen. I never got the sense that Tank was really interested in taking fights that the fans were fully engaged with. That was not a priority for him. It never was, and as it turns out, it's not gonna be.
No, I mean, he wants the fights that are going to line his pockets the most. And again, like I said, considering the money from what's being reported, I can't confirm anything, but if the number that's being reported is anywhere close to what he's actually going to get, hey, brother, go get your money. You know what I'm saying? Go get your money. I can't be mad at you at all. As a boxing fan, I'm disappointed that you didn't run it back with Lamont right away. I don't know if there's been talks for, Lamont to, if he gets past Isak to, run it back with Tank after that. Plus, just for boxing, I don't see. I guess we can just dive into it. I don't like the Tank versus Jake Paul fight for a lot of reasons. The biggest one is this fight's at 195 fucking pounds, bro. Tank walks around without working out, right? Just if he were to walk around just living life, he probably couldn't get over $150. So what are we doing?
I just to his credit, I bet he gets up to about 160.
If he's eating McDonald's and donuts all guy.
But I think that's what I think that's what he's doing. I think he fucks off in between fights the last couple of years, and I think he might be able to get away with walking around 160, 165, coming to camp, cut 25, 30 pounds. That's what I would guess. But that still, to your point, that's 30 pounds below what they're talking about.
We're talking about he'd have to be on the Nibs and Dakota diet to get up to 165, bro. Like, let's be real clear. He's a little guy. Like, people forget that too. He's 5'6" with his shoes on. You know what I'm saying? So we're talking about a dude who's 5'6" going up against a dude who's 6 foot. You know what I mean? And a dude who walks on. Jake Paul probably walks around at a good 230. You know what I mean? Walking around, and to his credit, he's been training. He's been taking boxing super serious. So I'm not gonna give him, I'm not gonna blow him up too big, like he walks around 250 or some shit like that. He probably walks around comfortably at 225, 230, right? You're fighting a guy at 195 pounds who's never seen a $150 in a fight. What are we doing, bro? Like, and I get that this is an exhibition. This is how they get away with that. You know what I mean? Because this isn't a real fight. But for all intents and purposes, this is ridiculous. 195. You're 200 pounds. This fight should never even be considered.
Yeah, it's Barnum and Bailey, bro. It's the circus is in town. That's all I can say.
Yeah, I mean, at least with Mike Tyson and Floyd Mayweather, I can say, well, that's just two retired guys doing some silly shit, right? This is a guy, Tank, who's actively fighting. Again, we've had this conversation before. Outside of Canelo, he's the second biggest draw in the sport right now, actively. And he's a champ. What are we doing, bro? What are we doing? But then again, you look at the money and you go, all right, I see what you're doing. Hey, I see what you're doing. But it makes me sad that that's where we are now, where it's like, the fighters of old, that's the reason we love them. They were fighting for legacies. They weren't fighting just for paychecks. Yes, was the money part of it? Of course. But guys were taking fights that were going to.
I think those two things can coexist. Those two things can coexist, right? Like being a prize fighter and also fighting for legacy can coexist. And I think that, for a lot of even modern day fighters, a fight like that wouldn't be of interest to them because it would be like a disrespect to their craft. I think there are a lot of guys that I'm not fucking doing that. But somebody like Tank, it shows you his hand when he goes, I can't wait to retire, and then takes this.
I think most guys wouldn't take it unless they were on their way out or out.
Yeah.
Right? Like this is a fight. Like if Floyd Mayweather took this fight, if Manny Pacquiao took this fight, if Roy Jones Jr. took this fight, nobody's going to be upset because these are guys who are already done with the sport or have been at one point.
Right.
So them taking this, you go, yeah, this dude's out here just making money. He's doing some silly shit. Even to the point where even the Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. fight, it's like, yeah, well, he's taking this fight because he's getting a big ass payday. He's not serious about boxing anyway. You know what I mean? Like we all knew what it was. Tank, you're still supposed to be serious about boxing right now, right? Maybe he's not, and maybe after this he does retire. Maybe he's like, hey, look.
Listen, we can only hope he retires. That's where I'm at. We can only hope he retires and clears the space for the next generation because he takes up a lot of fucking room, bro.
But he takes up a lot of room that everybody else wants to have, but they can't. And for whatever reason, again, love him or hate him, Tank sells, right? Tank puts asses in the seats. There are guys who are going to be willing to take whatever money Tank might throw at them because they know a fight with him is going to put them on the next level. Look at Rolly, right? Rolly literally talked himself into a Tank fight. And even though he got knocked out, he's gotten the biggest fights of his career since, right? And actually, now people are taking him serious. Whereas before, people didn't really take him as serious as a fighter.
Yep.
Ryan Garcia's biggest thing. Most people were just, oh yeah, that's the YouTube guy. That's the Instagram guy who's okay. They were looking at him as more of a pretty boy. Gets in, gets knocked out. But guess what? Now he's getting serious fights. Now people are looking at him as, a sideshow again, but that's of his own device. So, again, he's taking these fights against guys that probably nobody else wants to fight because they haven't earned it. But at the same time, they're big money fights. Rolly puts asses in the seats just as much as Ryan Garcia does. And let's be really clear. as much as I love him as a fighter, Shakur Stevenson is a hard sell, bro, as a main event by himself, right? He would need a Tank to blow up. He would need a, at this point, a Devin Haney or he needs one of those other guys to sell the pay-per-view. So if you're Tank, you're like, well, why would I split anything with you? You know what I mean? I'm the guy. Let's be really clear. And I think that's where these fights aren't getting made.
Let's move on to as we've talked about, kind of the circus being in town. There was some legitimate boxing over in Glasgow, Scotland this week on DAZN. Some really, this was kind of being billed as like, is somebody going to be the next great Scots fighter since Josh Taylor's retirement? I don't know. It might be a little premature, but there was definitely some great talent on here. But the guy that I kind of want to start with, we were talking about him last night, is Willie Hutchinson getting a 7th round stoppage over Mark Jeffers. Hadn't fought in a year, had lost a split decision to Josh Buatsi, who went on to have like a fight of the year contender this year with Callum Smith. And it's tough to know what to make of a guy when he has that much time off, but he kind of boxed a beautiful fight, man. He had some great footwork. He really found his rhythm in like that 4th, 5th round. And you could see him start to showboat. He's working from the outside, and then he stops Jeffers in the 7th. We were talking about the light heavyweight division last week with Najee Lopez. This seems like another interesting guy that may not be the guy, but that can get thrown in the mix with some of the best at light heavy and hold his own.
Look, man, we talk about this shit all the time. Stop throwing guys away after a loss, man. Just because you think, oh, well, see, we told you, everybody's waiting for that. I got you, because he took a loss. Look, first off, look at who the opponent is that they lose to. First off, right? Let's respect that. And then secondly, let's not forget that this is boxing. You know what I mean? It's any given day you can get in there and get in with a guy who might just have a little bit more than you got that day, right? Doesn't mean you're a bad fighter. Doesn't mean you're washed. Doesn't mean you're overrated. Just means on that day somebody had a little bit more than you did, and it worked out. So I think that's all that happened. I think that we're going to see a lot more of him, and I think that a rematch isn't out of the picture as far as I'm concerned. Once they get maybe a couple more wins under the belt. Look, he was impressive before the loss. He was impressive again. I'm pretty sure he'll be impressive again once he gets his shot at a belt, and I think that's going to come quicker than people think.
And I know that, Buatsi's set. I just looked. I've remembered he's set to fight Zach Parker on November 1st. That's a great matchup as well. And honestly, I would love to see Hutchins fight the winner of that matchup. I think in terms of a domestic UK type of fight, that could be, one of, if not the best light heavyweight in the UK outside of Callum Smith.
I mean, let's face it, bro. If you had to bet on Hutchins against just about anybody else in the light heavyweight division right now that isn't a champion, you know what I mean, or in the top 5, I'm taking him. That's the way you look at the way he fights, you look at the tools that he has. I don't think there are really too many people.
He's slippery, bro. He's slippery.
Yeah, and even in the fight that he lost, I was like, yeah, he's gonna figure it out at some point. Like the whole time, right? You're thinking it's coming, it's coming. It just didn't. But even now, I think he took that time off to reset. You see a lot of guys, they take time off and they didn't really do anything with it, right? I think they took the time off to get him right, because a lot of times after their first loss, a lot of fighters, they get lost up here. They need. I think he needed that reset, and I think it's helped, bro. I think they're doing him right a service in his corner, and they're getting him where he needs to be. I don't see a problem with the layoff. I thought he fought a great fight. I can't wait to see him again.
Some other good prospect types: Aston Brown getting a knockout win over Paul Keane. The other young guy on the card, I'm trying to remember his name. John Joe. That was his name. John Joe Carrigan making his pro debut. I was really impressed with him. Big, tall, long guy. But there was another guy that got a stoppage win named Louis O'Doherty just prior to the main event, and I'd never seen him before, and I was really impressed. He's a tough pressure fighter. Stops Regan Glacken, I believe, in the 6th round. Lot of fun, this guy. A lot of fun, and I think he's got the kind of engine, you see he doesn't have a lot of knockouts on his record, but you could see he's got the kind of engine that he's just going to be like an Isaac Cruz. If you give him that time to set, if you stand in front of him, he's going to be a handful.
I have to take your word for it. I didn't catch all the fights on the DAZN card. I'll be honest with you.
It's all good. I'm getting into the deep cuts for the deep cuts.
But that main event, though, goodness.
That was a hell of a fight, bro. I mean, listen, it wasn't the biggest weekend of boxing, and but at the end of the day, Cristobal Lorente is the European featherweight champion, is ranked number 10 in a sanctioning body. So when we're talking about fights of athletic significance, this was 2 legit guys. Nathaniel Collins, a really good undefeated featherweight prospect, had a great win over Lee McGregor back in May. He's been impressive generally, and I had never seen Lorente. And Collins just started so well, and then Lorente in the middle rounds started to turn the heat up. He started to up that fire on the burner just a little bit, and they really battled down the stretch. The fight was ruled a draw. That felt appropriate to me. I scored it a draw as well. But what were your reactions both to the decision and to the fight itself?
I'm gonna be honest with you. This is gonna be the first time I watched the main event where I'm not gonna tell you what I scored the fight, because I thought it would be I think it would be a disservice to the draw. I wasn't mad at the draw at all. I did pick a winner, but I'll say this: I'm not gonna say who I thought won, because I want to see this fight again really badly. That 6th round, Jesus,
that was like round of the year type shit,
bro. I mean, I thought there were a couple of times in this fight where I thought, oh, Lorente's out of there. And then here he comes back, and I'm like, Nigel, shut up. Nib said, shut up, bro. Don't say nothing else, because every time I thought, oh, man, this dude looks like he comes back, and it's like, it's a completely different round. If you don't follow boxers outside of the guys that you see in the U.S., you're doing yourself a disservice. This was probably one of the more entertaining fights I've seen for guys that and I'll be completely honest with you, I had never watched either one of these guys fight before. Had really no expectations. I'm following both of these guys from here on out. They've got my respect.
I had only seen Collins, and in terms of Lorente, I see the European title. That generally indicates a certain quality, but again, I don't have any knowledge and that, at the beginning of the fight, right, he was kind of getting his feel out, and he was kind of doing a back foot thing, and he's got Sandor Martin in the corner, and I'm kind of thinking to myself, okay, he's one of the more technical type Spaniards that's going to back foot. He's going to be smart. He's going to counterpunch. And then I think it was like the 4th round, his mode switched, and he started being on the front foot a little bit more. And when he let his hands go, he hit hard. He was accurate. He was sharp, and you could see it catch Collins off guard. And I felt like Collins made some great adjustments, but especially down the stretch, like it just felt like Lorente had gotten going downhill and had made it at least a very close fight, which is why I felt like the draw was okay. But those first 3 rounds where he got his look were also kind of the reason for the draw, because he gave those first 3 up early and put himself in a little bit of a hole.
Bro, I mean, look, and I'm not trying to sell this fight just for the sake of selling it. I'm here to tell you, this is the kind of fight they make movies about, right? This is one of those fights where if you didn't know what you were watching when you were watching it, you'd have swore you'd have put on HBO and were watching some kind of
it had boxing after dark, right?
Bro, I said, geez, man, look, I said, hold on, who are these? I had to double check. Like, am I watching the right thing? Look, these dudes they put on a show, bro. I mean, to me, to be honest with you, I think that 6th round is a heavy contender for fight of the year. But then it's like there were other rounds where you're like, well, shit, the 12th round was kind of it. The entire fight was the round of a year. Like that's how big of this probably won't get any consideration for fight of the year because these guys aren't big enough names stateside, maybe, right? But for real boxing purists, this is on the list.
We'll be talking about it in a couple of months. Like, listen, this ain't the one, but we got to tell people about it. Again, 2 unbeaten guys that took the risk. It was kind of everything that we love about boxing.
It wasn't kind of. It is. You get 2 undefeated guys, and they knew the assignment. Right?
Top 10 guys, by the way. These were not nobodies. These were guys in top 10 in sanctioning bodies.
Right. I mean, they were the main event for a reason, and they earned their money. Right. These weren't guys that just came in there thinking, I'm just going to try to get out of here with a pretty win, or, oh well, it's not my night. Let me kind of box and stay on the outside and get out of here. Nah, these were 2 guys who came in there and said, all right, let's go. You know what I mean? You want to swing? Let's swing for the fences. One of us is going to get knocked out of here, and neither one of them did. Neither one of them backed down. And hats off to the referee too, because a lot of times in fights like this, we've seen premature stoppages because a punch looked bad or a guy wasn't punching back at the right time. Right? The referee let them fight, and thank God for that. Because we got one of the best fights of 2025, period, bro. I don't care what side of the pond you're on. This is one of the best
top 10. Fights. Yeah, it's a top 10.
Yeah. And again, I think a part of that too has to do with the referee. Because let's be honest, there were a couple of times where I'm like, he's gonna stop it just because it looks bad. And then, the other guy, but he allowed the other guy to come back, right? And I think you have to let these guys fight. And I think it was beautiful work by all 3 guys, the fighters, the ref. I think the judges got it right. You know what I'm saying? This was, I almost feel like even if the guy I had winning on points had won, I'd have been mad. I'd have been like, but the other guy, like I'd have been like, well, damn it. So I think everybody got it right tonight or that night, and I would absolutely love to see this run back. I don't know that it will be or what the politics are like, across the pond. But if they can make this rematch, please sign me up.
Do you think the winner of that rematch is a player at featherweight? Because like featherweight's pretty good right now, but there's also not a lot of matchups getting made. It seems like since Espinosa beat Robesi that, I don't think people are dying to fight him. And it doesn't seem like anyone's dying to fight Angelo Leo after he knocked out Venato. And Nick Ball, I think, is making the most interesting fights in the division right now, generally speaking. But do you see the winner of that rematch as a guy who's at least a player in that mix?
I think the winner and the loser is. You know what I mean? I think this is, and, I hate to say it, but this is one of those fights where I think that both the winner and the loser come out doing well. Like the loser of that fight is going to be able to get fights. You know what I mean? Like, I think even if they don't do a rematch, if these guys go their separate ways now, right, they're going to be able to get fights because people just, people saw the same thing we did, right? But especially if they run it back, the guy who wins, he's going to be able to get a better fight than the loser. But I'm telling you, I think both of these guys are going to be able to come across the pond and get deals on fights based off of, what they did this weekend.
The other big sort of piece of boxing news, and it happened really so much more under the radar than I feel like than it should have, but Cecilia Brækhus beat Emma Kozin this weekend for a world title and retired immediately after the fight at age 44. An incredible career from Cecilia, man. And to win and become a unified champion in your last fight is sort of the the stamp of approval that she didn't really need, but now she's really got it. You know, I never felt like she got quite as much attention as she should have. She came kind of just before the Clarissa Shields, Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano era. She was more in the Heather Hardy era and was the main event of that last HBO card. And even by the time we were seeing her there, she was in her late 30s. She was kind of past her prime even then and had already done sort of her best work off air, or at least more regionally. But before Clarissa Shields was the GOAT, Cecilia Brækhus was the first lady of boxing. That's what they called her. And I think a trait that gets underappreciated in boxing sometimes is longevity, right? Being 44 years old, having taken the 2 L's against McCaskill, to come back, get a draw with Terry Harper, and then to win against Kozin, whose only loss prior was to Clarissa Shields, and to do it, you know, at a one more weight class up. It's just a highly unheralded career from an all-time great who sort of peaked just before women's boxing started to get some of the attention that it deserved.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, she was on a similar career path as, the Amanda Serranos of the world, right? Where, you thought, okay, well, maybe she was before her time. You know what I mean? If some Amanda Serrano were 10 years younger, we'd be talking about her different, right? I think you could say the same thing about Cecilia Brækhus. I think if Cecilia Brækhus was 10 years younger, you know what I mean? She'd be in the top 5 of our pound for pound right now for women, if not towards the top. I mean, you're talking about 39-2. I think the reason most people don't know who she is because she doesn't have a lot of knockouts. She's not a knockout artist, right? She's not heavy-handed. She's only got, of her 39 wins, only 9 of those were knockouts. But and she's Norwegian, so it's not like, she had a huge following on the U.S. side of things. But again, I think that goes to show, how far women's boxing has come in the last couple of years. Because I think, again, had the attention that the women are getting now been, what it was back when she was in her prime, we'd all know who Cecilia Brækhus is.
The thing was, a lot of her best fights, like, they weren't on HBO when she was in her prime. By the time she was fighting on HBO and getting really great wins over Callie Race and Erica Farias, legit, Callie Race had a great career. Cecilia was like 38 years old by then. And so we already weren't seeing the best version of Cecilia was YouTube videos from fights that she had anywhere between 2010 and 2013. And she was tremendous. She was, one of the smartest fighters in all of boxing at the time. And I just don't think that many people knew or were interested. And it took somebody that was a little bit more loud, like Clarissa Shields, to kind of tell you, no, I'm the best. It took somebody who, like Amanda, who was really putting girls to sleep, to get it. It took something that, it was a bunch of them, right? There was a bunch of this new generation of women that are now starting to age out a little bit. But the Katie Taylor, Amanda Serrano, Michaela Mayer, Sinise Estrada, that group of women really put boxing to the forefront. And Cecilia was just before that. They did it not on the backs of fighters like Cecilia, but certainly there was fighters between Layla Ali and Clarissa Shields who helped to build that momentum, who didn't know. Holly Holm was one of those. She only got the credit because she moved over to MMA.
I mean, you talk about the Ann Wolfs of the world. You talk about the Holly Holmes. These were women who were doing it, some of their fights damn near for free. You know what I'm saying? And now, now you get Ann Wolf was knocking everybody's head off, right? I think Ann Wolf was a woman who could have fought dudes and probably could have came out.
Listen, bro, we see the handful of very successful, like there's our top 10 pound for pound. There's probably 10 other fighters after that are making really good money. But like, I did an interview with India Rodriguez, maybe 2 years ago. And she was telling me a story about having to pay to be on a card. She was losing money to get opportunities. That's still even today where we are in women's boxing and in boxing as a whole, you know.
And I think that was one of the special things about when Amanda Serrano fought, Heather Hardy. I think it was like, you know, Heather's story is, yeah, she's had to do that before, right? This was when she was a bigger name in women's boxing at the time. She was
She was
one
one
of
of the
those.
biggest.
Yeah, she was one of the biggest names in women's boxing, and she said, the biggest card that she had ever been on, she ended up owing money on. You know what I mean? And it makes you sad to think about it. But then she gets the fight with Amanda Serrano. They pay homage. She gets to ride off into the sunset. Not every female fighter gets that. Bracket, she gets to ride off into the sunset. Right? She got her title. She gets to go out on top. She gets to ride off, into the sunset. Not every female fighter gets that. Not every fighter, period, male or female, gets
Very
that.
few fighters get that, I think, is even a
Right,
better way.
right. So you're looking at, she gets the ride off into the sunset moment. Hats off to her. She's, in my opinion, in female boxing, she's the first ballot Hall of Famer, and I'm pretty sure there'll be a movie made about her. If they don't, shame on them.
And didn't really take any damn punishment doing it. I mean, I remember watching, because especially the Christy Martin era of boxing, Nibs, you remember there was like that weird taboo thing of like, well, they got to make an action fight because nobody's going to give a shit if they don't. So they'd come in and there was no defense and it was rock'em sock'em. I mean, you see Cecilia, she got that beautiful long jab. You see her thinking it through. She looked closer to Bernard Hopkins than to Christy Martin. And it felt like she helped to transition women's boxing into a more skill-based thing.
I mean, real talk. I mean, in women's boxing, you didn't really start to see boxing, right? It was fighting. It was, it was,
it was like Layla and Ann, right? They were kind of the first ones.
Yeah. I mean, Ann was a knockout machine, but I would say Layla was the first one where it was like, oh, that's real boxing. Like, she's really putting on a show, and yeah, of course, she's knocking people out because she's Layla Ali. You know what I mean? But I think that, again, when you look at the Celia Brackets, I think if she had knockout power, right, she'd be a much bigger name in the sport. But I think that's where the fans, kind of missed out. She was boxing beautifully for years, bro.
Caught between two eras, Nibs. Hell of an episode this week, as is tradition, as we always do. And as you know, if you've been with us long enough, maybe this is new if you're coming to us with Big Mouth Radio, but speak on the absolute importance of supporting local boxing.
I talk about it all the time. If you're supporting local boxing, you're supporting yourself. It's the community that you grew up in. It's the people that, it's not just the guys that get into this sport and they become big super names, right? It's the guy that ends up getting the ability to feed his family in a different way. It's a guy that, you know, boxing takes him out of the prison system. Boxing takes him off the streets. Boxing takes him or her. Let's be really clear. There are a lot of people, male and female, that come into boxing that don't become superstars, but become better people within their communities because of what they've, a boxing gym let them in. A boxing gym let them, gave them an opportunity to do something, where they could fix whatever problems it is they had in their lives and become better people. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to, boxers or people around boxing gyms who said, boxing saved my life and nobody will ever know who I am. Right. So that's why you should support local boxing. And then take into consideration when you do catch that one, right? You catch that kid from Omaha, Nebraska that nobody thought was going to be anything, and now he's the biggest name in boxing, right? You take that kid from Ohio who people thought was making stupid YouTube videos. Now, he's one of the biggest names in boxing. Tank Davis, nobody wanted anything to do with the kid. He was literally abandoned as a kid, right? Look at him now, from Baltimore. Nobody was looking at him. Now people who supported him, the people who were there for him at the beginning, get to come back and say, aha, we got our one. Thank you. Support local boxing. Fuck with us or fuck off.
We will be back next week, folks. Appreciate you. Peace.